Okay, now that I have all of my selection sets created, where I've broken down the faces of this model into kind of general categories that then I'll create UVs from, let's look at UVs. And UVs are the way that, let me actually communicate this by adding just a regular cube to the scene. So this 3D cube, if I'm going to add texture to it, is going to unwrap in a particular way and be placed on a 2D kind of UV editor here. So in order to, when we're applying textures to this cube, it's gonna unfold in this kind of pattern. And what you can see on the model itself are the green lines are the ones where we have continuity across the UVs, and these white lines are where we have border edges that have been kind of cut apart in the UV editor. Now, the UV editor, we have a one-to-one, we have a kind of grid here that tiles endlessly, and so our textures also get applied across this entire UV grid. But we really want to keep the UVs for any particular model from the 0 to 1 kind of this this these the scale here, this range 0 to 1. And the reason is because if we bring it into Substance Painter in a later video, it's going to bring in just this one kind of square of UV mapping. And so we want everything contained within it. So currently, let me delete that um, cube. So currently my Rhino has these terrible UVs. It's not utilizing all the space. I'm not able to see even how it's broken up. And if I go to texture this, the textures are going to wildly misapply. So just to show you what that may look like, I'm going to nest my UV editor. I'm going to maybe collapse it a bit. Let me get rid of this for a moment and show you what the textures would look like if I applied them now to the UVs the way they are. So what I'll do is go to my attribute editor. Now, something I didn't do with my model that I should have before I was finished modeling it is here in my attribute editor, I have all of these, this history of all of the modifications that I made to this model, and it's like this endless list because I modeled it for a very long time. What I'm going to want to do actually is say edit, delete all by type history on this model, and that is going to delete all of that transform history. I don't need to edit it any longer. I want it kind of off of my attribute editor so that I'm able to get to this last node here, which is our material node. So you should already be familiar with materials. What I'm going to do is just in the color channel of this standard surface material, before I do anything actually, let me go ahead and go to my rendering tab and add a new material to this model. In the color channel here, I'm going to add a texture. And just to kind of illustrate this, I'm going to add a checker texture. And if I hit 6, we'll see what this looks like on the model. Okay, so this is how that texture is applied. You can see that in the eyes, it's applied in this strange way. It's not tiled with any like uniformity across the model. And it's also because like when I showed you our UV editor here, Maya, this is just a Maya Legacy texture. Which we see here, and it does repeat across the entire, it repeats endlessly in all directions, but here we can see it. And so it should have a particular scale to it, but because the UVs themselves are squashed in these corners, it doesn't tile correctly. So we want to redo the UVs for this model so that when we apply a texture, it's applying it in a uniform way and that we're able to see them here and when we go to paint the model in Substance Painter. So in order to do that, let me go ahead for my color channel here and say break connection to get rid of that texture file. And what I'm going to do now is use there's a couple ways that we can create UVs. I'm going to use all of these quick select sets that I've already created in order to create the UVs, but I do want to show you that I can do like an overall automatic mapping. And this kind of gets a little bit close to the like a legible UV format. We have the front and the back and all of our faces now, but we have all of these little pieces here that don't necessarily match up. So there are ways that we can maybe think about using this without using the quick select sets and moving and modifying these UVs in this kind of way in order to have them. Let's see what this looks like actually if we didn't take that material, that texture node. Let's go back and just so we can see what it looks like now, how those UVs are laid out I mean, they're not, these are stretched. We can really see it here. These are really stretched. Um, there's not continuity really. There's a little bit in the front. And you can see where that is placed here, and that's why this is tiled the way it is. Um, so maybe it's okay, but it's rather imperfect. Let me go back to my texture, my material node, and break that connection again. So what I'm going to do, so I can just see the UVs a little bit better, what I'm going to do actually, because you can see on the model, right, I told you that where we have, because we're in component mode, if we were in object mode, it'd be green, where we have these green lines is where we maintain continuity between the faces on the UV, and then these white lines are how they're broken up. So there's no logic to this, like why I have a kind of patch of here I have like a patch of cheek that's not continuous. And so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to start with my left side selection set for my model. So I'm going to say select quick select set left side. Okay. And now I'm going to say UV and maybe do an automatic UV for those. And I'm going to pull them out. And I still don't like the way that looks. I'm going to try something else where I'm going to say UV and best plane. And then I'm going to select maybe a couple faces and hit enter. And that looks way better. That is how I want to break down this model. Now I do have a couple random random faces that are not connected. So what I'll do is just clean that up. I'm also going to rotate this side around. This is a much better start for creating the UVs. So now that, let's go to my face mode here. So I'm able to select individual faces. What I'm going to do is see where I'm missing these edges. So go to edge mode and see what are the edges that are missing. Ah, this is where the ear is. Okay. And these are kind of overlapping. This is kind of an issue. So, and let me see where these are located. And I can do that by seeing where they are in the model itself. So here, where is this edge? It's in the back. Ah, let's see. It might have. I should see it showing up on the model. Let's go to face mode and see where these faces are. Okay. This must be here. Okay, so this accidentally was selected as part of that selection set. I'm going to fix that later, and I can fix it actually by going to tail and saying some kind of best plane for the tail might be here, and say enter. Now that's removed that piece, and now I have the tail as its own separate UV component. Now this is wrapped around, so I'm going to fix that later. It's also way too big. So I did say I wanted to keep these UV scaled within the 0 to 1, these values here in this one tile. But for now, while I'm trying to unwrap the UVs and create them, I'm going to pull each kind of component apart, each piece apart, so that I can kind of work with it a little bit easier. Let's also see what this face is here and find it on the model by hitting F. Okay, so this is another accidental selection for creating these UVs. So I can fix that by doing the horn front, saying select, quick select set, horn front, and creating maybe a best plane for this. So I say UVs, best plane, maybe this front plane, and hit enter. Okay, now that little piece is gone, and there's my horn. I'm going to want to fix these horns and this tail a little bit later and unwrap them. But for now, I'm going to just leave it here. If I double click on a UV shell, then where this is a shell where they're all connected, I can then make changes. I can double click on it. So one thing I'm going to do here is, and I'm going to look at my model to do it, I'm going to want to add some extra kind of cuts in this model in order to unwrap it. So one thing maybe I can do is, now that I've done best plane, which has kind of been helpful, I can use some other tools that I have in my UV editor. And one of them that I like here is unfold. And I'm going to say unfold those UVs. So now, even though I used best plane to create those UVs, I can unfold them And now I can see these UVs. And what this will do is it'll create that texture and apply it seamlessly around this part of the model. Let's do the same thing to the right side. So let me say select, quick select, set right side. And let's again pan to the right side of the model. Right now you can see how those UVs are laid out. Here are all of their parts, which doesn't look great. Now I'm going to say again UV and say best plane and select this plane here again and hit enter. Now I have the right side. I'm going to rotate this right side around and I'm going to position it maybe up. I can double click. I'm going to always want to work in face mode if I'm moving components around in my UV editor. If I work with edge mode, it's going to select, it's always going to kind of keep those edges, those even if they're border edges and you're only selecting one here, it's still going to also move that second border edge that it's and the edge that it shares. So we want to always work in face mode. And then here, I'm going to want to do that same thing where in this case, I'll do it for the full model. I can double click on the shell to select all of those faces. And I'm going to say UV, or not, I'm going to say UV toolkit, and I'm going to say unfold. Now it's unfolded those UVs. I'm going to do it for this as well. So I'm going to say unfold. There, perfect. Let's go ahead and do that for the rest of my UV, the selection sets that I've created. So select, quick select set. Let's do underneath. And let's say, let's kind of toggle to the bottom here and say best plane, select this one, enter. Now I have the underside, and with those selected, I'll say unfold. And triangulation, select message, non-manifold geometry. So there must be some part of this model that needed to be cleaned up. I'm just going to say fix. Okay, so now I must have accidentally extruded somewhere and there was non-manifold geometry, meaning two faces were on top of each other. Okay, so now I have the underside here. And because I made sure that my faces all had a kind of uniformity, now I know when I'm making my UVs, I can kind of scale these component parts down so that they're going to apply, the texture is going to be applied in a uniform way. Select, quick select set, let's say the back, and let's do the same thing. Let's toggle to the back. I'm going to hit F to frame up this selection, make sure I'm in my select mode here. And then I'm going to say UV, best plane, select this best plane. And let's move this out of the way and up. And again, I'm going to say unfold. That kind of flattens it. And I might want to rotate them, scale them down. I can use all the same transform tools that I do in my viewport in my UV editor. The other thing I want to do here, I'm going to make this, the tool a little bit smaller. I'm just going to hit the minus key on my keyboard to make it smaller here. That looks like the back. Now let's do the front. And I can also say optimize for any of these, which might be helpful if I want to. These all look pretty optimized, but this is a little bit too big. Let's also rotate it so it's the right position and scale it down. Okay, we have a couple more components. I think most of them are the feet and the ears. And there's the nostrils, and we just have the inside of the mouth. So I don't think I've made, maybe I did. I don't think I did. So here we will just fix this part by using another tool. So this, we're going to use the, you can see here in my attribute editor, or my UV editor, that when I'm selecting this edge, it's also selecting this. That means that's the same edge. So I can select all of these edges that share, and I'm going to say cut and sew, move and sew together. And then I'm going to select these faces and say unfold, optimize. And now we have that interior of the mouth. So now all of my parts are very nicely kind of organized, except for, let's see what happens if I select, these are overlapping UVs. If I unfold this, it's gonna, and I don't love that. And the reason I don't is because as we're gonna apply a texture to any of these parts, the texture is really gonna get stretched along these longer. Let me show you back here, right, with the, if this is the way the UVs are set for the tail, it's really going to stretch the part that we're really going to see here is going to really stretch. So, and then also I kind of have a bit of an issue with this tail. Um, so let me fix that actually while I can, and you'll see how that's going to affect the UVs, which is why we UV map first and then we can add divisions. So let me multi-cut this. So I have, right, and so now you see that that's, I don't love that. I'm going to actually maybe multi-cut from here to here. Yeah, that's better. So see that this even though that's one single face, it doesn't know how to resolve it in Maya because it's like this geometry doesn't make any sense. So I need to add that edge. And as I'm doing that, it's adding it here. And I really should be working in symmetry while I'm doing this to make sure I am maintaining that symmetry. But for now, I think that should do it. So now what I'd like to do for those parts, because I don't really want it to be this way, I'm going to select maybe this edge. Let's see, maybe this underside because we won't see it as much. If I go to my edge, I'm going to select this edge here. This was part of the, should be part of the tail, these two faces. So let me quickly do that because I can see here on my model, I actually want these faces, which are part of the back, to be part of the tail. So let me select these two faces here and find them. Or rather, let me go to my edge mode and select these edges. And then I'm going to say cut cut those edges. And then I'm going to select these two faces here. And if I select them on my model, it's also going to select them here in my UVs. And I'm going to maybe move those out of the way. And then I'm going to say edge, select these two edges, make sure I'm not extruding anything. And here in my UVs, wherever my tail is there it is. You can see that those edges are selected too. So then I'm going to say, create or cut so and say move and sew. So now those edges are part of the tail. Here I also want to say move and sew. It's still seeing that as a border edge for my UVs. So I'm going to say move and sew, and the same thing with this side. Modify or cut sew, move and sew. So now that I have that done, I'm going to select these edges here, and I'm going to say cut. So I'm going to cut and cut a border edge there. Now let's see what happens if I double click this UV shell and now say unfold. Now that looks a little bit better, right? It kind of is maintaining the right shape here. So I think that that should be good. Now maybe this would be a different kind of texture. I might want to cut it even more. So I may want to cut, let's see, let's go to my edge. That is not one yet. I might want to cut there. Cut. And then here again, face mode, click the shell and say unfold, and maybe optimize as well. Okay, so now that that's nice and kind of flattened out, let's do the same thing for the horns. So let's find a nice seam for the horns and then the feet. And I think I'm in an orthographic view accidentally here. So let's say perspective view. So let's find those horns. And I think I'll want to unwrap along this edge in the back. So let's go to my edge selection, select these edges all the way up the horn. And there I can see it in my outliner. In my UV editor. I keep wanting to call this something else. It's a UV editor. So go to cut sew, cut, and now select this shell and again say unfold. Now that looks better. I can say optimize again. Let's do it the same with this front horn edge. Let's select this group of edges to then cut and double click these faces and unfold. Nice. So now I'm going to want to scale this and change it a bit. And I'm going to want to scale these. I believe we are going to kind of keep them maybe that size. So let me kind of group these now. These horns, I'm going to group together, and I'm going to position them next to each other so I can look at the model and say, well, this one needs to be a little bit smaller than this one. And then this we said was the tail. So let me also select this whole shell and rotate it. Yeah, I'll just leave it oriented this way so I can kind of tell what it is. This also might want to be scaled down. I'm going to kind of decide that in a bit. Here we have the eyes. We're leaving, I think we do want at least the eyes here to be positioned in a way that makes sense. Let's say optimize for this eye. Let's see which face I'm working. Okay, that's oriented the right way. Now let's check this side and see, is that truly a top edge? No, top face? No. So then this whole shell also needs to be rotated around. So we know that's the left eye, that's the right eye, and they're oriented the right way. These are the bottom of the feet. Now let's look at these feet here and decide, I think maybe this edge in the back, right? I'm going to want to cut this as well. I don't want it to be positioned this way. I really want that texture to be applied this way and then maybe make a seam here in the back. So this is my front and I'm going to select, let's select that edge and we'll say cut. And then we will select this shell, go to face mode, say unwrap or unfold. And that may be better. Then let's do, although we can say maybe optimize. Still don't love the way that this particular face is pretty big. Guess it's okay. Guess it is big here on the model too, so that's fine. Let's do the same thing for this right front. Let's keep the symmetry going. Let's find the edge that matches the edge on that side. I really should continue to work this one in, for the last feet, for these other feet, I'm gonna use symmetry. So let's say cut and select this shell and unfold, optimize. Let's do the same for the back. This time, let's turn symmetry back on. We're in the Object C so that when I go to select, I just have to do this once. I find that edge, maybe this edge in the back, and then it will do it for both sides. And I will say cut. And then I can double click these faces and say unfold and optimize, and it's going to do that for those as well. Okay, so now I have all of my shells. I'm going to scale up the shells here that are these interior kind of pieces, because they are going to get their own material and they can be a little bit bigger. Same with the ears and the eyes. So I think now what I'll do is separate these out into the different materials. So this is the mouth, and let me position this the same way it is here on my model so I know my direction is that I'm working with, the interior of this mouth here. So, okay, so that's the top. Let me rotate this whole shell this way. Okay, so that way I know that's the inside of the mouth. These eyes are a little too big. Let's scale them down. Let's move them. Let's make sure I have, okay, this one, and let's turn off symmetry. This one we will move here. We'll just say this is the eyes. That's the left eye. This is the right eye. Let's give them some space around them. Let's move them down. We can put the ears here as well. I'm going to kind of build out this one material's UVs in this panel for now. So all of the rest of these components, all the rest of these UV shells, I'm going to fit within that 1-to-1. So now let me start to move them into place. The other thing I can do, which might be helpful, is select this edge so that I don't have a big seam, but these edges are all connected. And the front, I might want to do something different with the front. I don't know. I might want to connect it in the front instead. So now I'm going to have to make a decision. And I think it's going to be the front. I want to connect the front edges of these two models. I mean, these two UV shells. So I'm going to say, I'm going to select them here. And again, I'm going to say move and sew. Now they're connected. Let's double click this whole shell. Make sure I'm in face mode. And say optimize, unfold. Let's rotate it around. And now let's scale that down. Okay, so now those are connected. So when I go to paint a texture, I'm keeping this front seam, I'm keeping this front seam seamless. I'm going to keep these in the same UV. I'm going to keep these in the same texture. So now I have my two groups of UVs. So the UVs are done. What I'm going to do now is select all of these faces. These already have, and we'll go to our model here. So I'm really happy with the way these are laid out. Only by texturing them are we going to see if what we've done is the right way to do it. But let's go to our model here. We're going to say attribute editor. Let's also delete all by type history for this model. And for this standard surface 2, I'm going to rename this Rhino body material, MAT for material. And then I'll select all of these faces. You can select them just in the UVs and they'll select them on my model. And now I'm going to say create a new material for this. And I'm going to name this Rhino material. Okay. So now I have, and now I'm going to make sure that I drag these actually over the UVs here so that they're all in this one-to-one. So one material will show up in the other. So there we are. We have our UVs done. I'm going to file and say save scene. And now I have my UVs. Let me go back really quickly and open my Rhino model. And with the model itself, I'm also going to clean this up and say delete all by type history and make sure I'm named this Rhino Geo. And I'm going to delete these quick select sets for here and say file, save scene. Last thing I can do now is I'm going to open back up my UVs. And this is my UVs before I've smoothed my model. So I'll go to my UV editor here. Again, there they all are. Even though they're overlapping, when I bring them in and texture them, they're going to have two different textures applied. So this is fine. But now I'm going to select my full model. And if I go to smooth, it's just going to add those divisions already to the UVs as they are. And now my model is nice and smooth and it's ready to texture.